Let's go! Yes, dude! And the comeback. Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a great weekend. Happy Monday to ya. Today, let's talk about Halo Infinite, man. I truly believe that the game needs both new players and the old players to succeed, to really have the momentum necessary to capture interest and hopefully be a very healthy game for a long period of time. Played some shotgun snipers. It's super fun. I honestly haven't played shoddy snipes in a few years. I should have turned that playlist on forever ago because it was just casual fun and got a few hours worth of just fun and clips. And yeah, it's a cool reminder of like the good old days when I was in college playing Halo Reach and Halo 3 with buddies, because those are my favorite memories with the game. Now, Infinite is supposed to be, right, this 10-year journey, free-to-play multiplayer, something that evolves over time. And on paper, I really think this is a great idea. If executed well, if it's got enough content, and if it avoids the pitfalls of the live service stuff, right? There can be a lot of negative things that come alongside live service, and I'm not opposed to paying money for a complete product that's got, some weight to it. But at the same time, too, I've always felt like the joke of Halo 3.5, where like, what if you just got new maps for Halo 3 forever? Like, I do think a more CSGO style of game that lasts much longer is where Halo fits best. If the sandbox is great, if the gameplay is really good, just give me new maps, maybe give me the occasional like balance tuning, very small stuff, of course, nothing too big, and that is a really great platform to work with. That's why I totally think Infinite has a big opportunity here to possibly succeed huge. Now, you need the old players and the new players both in order for this thing to succeed. Infinite and Halo really depends on that initial release, the perception at launch, and then how well it retains that momentum moving forward to be a healthy game in the FPS space. You need new players to keep the franchise relevant. You need fresh eyes into the scene, new people who've never played a Halo game, who will watch some streamers or watch some YouTube videos and go, I'm interested, let me check that out, let me go download it. And I think there's going to be a ton of new players, more than ever before, with this game being free to play. That is a huge advantage that this game already has. But additionally, I think you also need the old crowd in there, some of the older players from Halo 1, 2, and 3 for that initial push. Because even though Infinite is going to have probably massive marketing, Halo is a very famous brand and IP, you still are going to have to recognize the fact that it's not the centerpiece in the FPS space, and it hasn't been for like a decade now. It has not occupied the same player base numbers that the competitors in the FPS space have, and it's missed out on like 6-7 years of how the industry has evolved, right? And so having the buy-in and interest from some of the old crowd will help with that initial oomph, right? Maybe some of that initial momentum that would maybe garner some of the attention of that new and old player stuff. And what's interesting is all games have churn, like everything. Players play, they move on, they try something else, maybe they come back. That's just a product of the times. Like, people don't just play one game anymore, and we're living in a universe where tons of free games and tons of new things are coming out, and everything's live service, so they're all competing with limited time events and game modes and stuff to try and pull your interest back in, to try and yank you to try something out. So churn is going to happen with Infinite, just as it happens with every single game. But the trick is, right, you want to have the new players coming in or the returning players coming back at a rate higher than the churn of the fall off, right? There's nothing wrong with just taking a break from a game, but you need the combination of those two crowds in order to have that successful returning bit or staying power versus the churn. What I find kind of interesting in the last probably 3 or 4 years is there's a lot of fighting, it seems like, between the two crowds of like old players criticizing new players criticizing the old players. I don't think it's the majority of people, but definitely on Twitter, it seems like the two have villainized one another and make them the centerpiece of the arguments for everything, right? Oh, the old players don't want anything to change. They just want the old school. That will never work. And they just hate progress and hate everything that isn't what their favorite Halo game is. And vice versa, like, I think the old crowd sometimes can put on the new people, like, well, you just don't understand, you weren't there, you didn't live through this, you have no idea what you're talking about. And it's kind of frustrating for me to watch and see because, like, dude, we're not the biggest scene anymore. And to then, like, villainize our two subset groups even further with, like, hey, rah, 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 I don't agree with your stance or viewpoint of how, like, this game's design should be, just does not do us any favors or hope in terms of trying to return into the limelight. Like, I'm somebody who's probably always going to play a little Halo from time to time and enjoy it. I love MCC, and I'm going to keep playing it with my buddies. And through the rest of the time, I'll probably return back to these games with fond memories. But don't for a second believe that I don't want to have Halo come right back into the mainstay, be a big, successful game again, alongside the greats, the Sieges, the Fortnites, the Call of Duties. Like, I want to see it up in that pantheon of games instead of, sort of like this, I hate to say afterthought, but it's definitely not in the same echelon or tier as those titles anymore. Oh, that was a collat. That was a headshot collat, I think. Back 2004 through 11, it was, man. There was obviously less like competition on the market and different social circumstances going on. But when you see those two communities just arguing and bickering with one another, hey, I don't think that's representative of the majority of people in the Halo scene, right? And I'm not going to try and regulate conversation. I'm just letting you guys know we've got to have both groups together enjoying the game in order to succeed and push back towards that center space. Otherwise, if we just continually like yell at each other, we're not going to get anywhere, right? Popularity cannot be bought. You've seen that time and time again. When the esports craze was going wild, so many of these companies would just throw huge, huge tournaments with giant prize pools expecting that to basically buy them an esport. And it just didn't. I mean, look at Overwatch League, for goodness sakes. Probably one of the biggest financial investments ever with the franchisements in terms of esports, right? The franchisement and really wanting to make this thing a global sensation. And you look now, it's not doing so hot. You cannot buy popularity. It has to be earned. And that comes from a good game. Like, obviously, this all comes back down to the core of Halo Infinite needs to be a good game. It needs to have great base mechanics, and I supremely hope it's got a good sandbox and something that is fun for both old and new players. Because if you've got that good foundation, then you have a 10-year game that's going to get updates and new stuff and maps and limited time modes and all of those things that can power a community for a long time. And it also gives the opportunity, like, I don't know if you guys have seen the transformation of the Master Chief Collection the last couple of years, but in my mind, it's very impressive. Like, I'm very still disappointed about 2014 and the state that it launched in, but the last 2 to 3 years, the MCC team, I believe, has done a phenomenal job listening to the community and making this thing better day by day, week by week, month by month. And now it's a really fun, awesome representation of a lot of these older games. Not perfect, not the perfect preservation, but if that philosophy is applied to Infinite and it comes out as a good game and you start from a good base point, then it only gets better from there. And you need both the old school crowd to enjoy it as well as the new players. And my hope would be that the scene recognizes that and we don't just, I don't know, like, stop directing the criticisms and frustrations of the game's popularity and where it sits right now at one another. Because I can guarantee you this, it's not the new players' fault that the popularity of like Halo 5 is where it is, and it's not the old players' fault either. It is a product of the game, its reception, the time, place in which it came out, the support that it had. You cannot buy popularity. It has to be earned through so many different working things. And it comes down to, look at the last 10 years of Halo versus, 2001, 04, 07, those releases. I think, again, lightning in a bottle is hard to catch, but it's a lot easier if you got a great game to start with. What do you guys think about this? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Have a wonderful start to your week. Subscribe to the channel, do those YouTube things. Follow me on Twitter at BBKDragoon, and I'll talk with you again very soon.